My husband threatened to divorce me because I wouldn't let his best friend move into my office. Sunday dinners used to be the one part of my week that felt completely mine. My name is Kala, and back then I'd finish whatever laundry I'd been pretending not to see, put something easy in the oven, pour a glass of wine, and sit at the little table by the window with my husband. Sometimes my closest friend came over, but most Sundays it was just us, talking about work, rent, whose turn it was to call the maintenance office about the dripping faucet, and all the ordinary married stuff I used to find comforting. Then my husband's best friend started showing up. At first, it really wasn't a problem. They'd known each other since they were teenagers, and I'd known him almost as long as I'd known my husband. He was the guy who helped us carry a couch up 3 flights of stairs when we moved in. He'd been in our wedding. He had spent holidays with my family when his own plans fell apart. I didn't see him as some stranger invading my house. I saw him as part of the package. That's probably why I let so much slide. One weekend became most weekends. A Saturday afternoon visit turned into him staying through dinner, falling asleep on our couch, waking up Sunday morning, and asking what we were doing for breakfast like he lived there. Then he started arriving without texting. He'd knock once and try the handle because my husband had apparently told him that was fine. He left a phone charger beside our couch, a sweatshirt over the back of a chair, a pair of sneakers near the door, and one deeply irritating travel mug in our sink that somehow became my responsibility every time I cleaned the kitchen. My husband thought all of this was funny. "Look at him nesting," he said once, while his friend searched our cabinets for chips. I laughed because that was easier than saying, "Actually, I hate this. That was my mistake, and I'm not going to rewrite myself as some fearless boundary-setting woman who was ignored from day one." I wasn't. I made faces behind cabinet doors. I cleaned louder than necessary. I gave one-word answers. I complained to my friend through messages while telling my husband everything was fine. Very mature. Extremely effective. The bigger problem was that I worked from home for a financial services company, and the second bedroom was my office. It wasn't a cute little desk in a guest room that I used twice a week. I spent my entire workday in there. I handled reports, client records, video meetings, and spreadsheets that could ruin my week if I misplaced one decimal. I needed quiet. My husband's friend had a laugh that could probably be heard from the parking lot. One Friday, he came over around lunch while I was in a meeting with my supervisor. He and my husband started watching something in the living room, and every few minutes there was shouting, clapping, or the sound of both of them arguing with a screen. I muted myself 3 times. At one point, my supervisor paused and asked, "Is everything okay over there?" I wanted to disappear under my desk. When I came out afterward, I said, "Could you guys keep it down when I'm working?" My husband looked surprised, like I had wandered into someone else's home and made a weird request. "You could work from the kitchen when he's here," he said. I actually laughed because I thought he was kidding. He wasn't. "The kitchen is 15 feet from the television." Then close the door. "My office has the door." His friend got quiet and stared at his phone. My husband rolled his eyes and said I was making it awkward. Somehow, I ended up apologizing for my tone. I still think about that sometimes, because my tone had apparently become the emergency, not the fact that 2 grown men were yelling outside my office in the middle of a workday. After that, the friend tried to be quieter for maybe 1 weekend. Then everything went back to normal. My Sunday dinners disappeared because my husband always wanted to include him. If I invited my own friend over, I felt like I had to warn her that he would probably be there too. Once, she quietly asked me if he had moved in, and I said, "Not officially." That joke aged terribly. By the time the actual conversation happened, my husband and I had been married for 4 years and together for 10. We lived in a rented 2-bedroom apartment that we could afford as long as both of us kept working, and neither of our cars decided to become a financial emergency. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable. Or I thought we were stable. It was a Sunday night, right after dinner. His friend had left about an hour earlier, which was unusual enough that I remember enjoying the silence. I had just put the last plate in the dishwasher when my husband said, "We need to talk about something." Those words have never improved anyone's evening. He was sitting at the table with both hands around a glass of water. He had this careful expression on his face, the one he used when he wanted to present something as reasonable before I had even heard it. His friend's lease was ending in about 6 weeks. The rent was going up, and he didn't want to renew. According to my husband, the obvious solution was for him to move in with us temporarily. I stared at him and waited for the rest of the plan. There was no rest of the plan. "Where would he sleep?" I asked. "In the office." I honestly thought I had misheard him. "My office? It's the second bedroom." "Yes. And it's my office. We could move your desk." To where? The kitchen, maybe, or part of the living room. The same kitchen he had already suggested I use while his friend watched television. I folded my arms and asked how long temporarily meant. He said they hadn't decided. I asked how much his friend would contribute. He said they would figure it out. I asked whether the property manager even allowed another adult to move in. He said that could be handled later. Every answer was basically a shrug wearing a sentence. I told him I needed time to think, not because I was secretly considering it, but because I was trying not to scream. My home had already started feeling like a clubhouse I was allowed to clean, and now he was proposing that I give up the room that paid half our bills. My husband's face changed. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't slam anything or raise his voice. He just went flat. "I thought you'd understand," he said. "Understand what? You haven't explained anything. He needs help, and I need a place to work. He's my best friend. I'm your wife." The second I said it, I hated how childish it sounded, like I was asking him to pick who got the front seat. But that was how he had framed it, not me. He stood up and said he didn't want to argue. Then he went into our bedroom and shut the door. I stayed at the table angry enough to shake and embarrassed that I was angry. That was a pattern with me. I could feel something completely reasonable and then immediately put it on trial. Was I selfish? Was I cold? Was I being territorial? Plenty of people helped friends when rent got too expensive. Maybe I could work from the bedroom. Maybe we could set rules. Maybe I was turning a temporary inconvenience into a marriage issue. Then I looked at the travel mug his friend had left in my drying rack again, and I had the very mature thought that I wanted to throw it out the window. About 45 minutes later, my husband came back. He was calm. That's the part that bothered me most. If he had stormed out and returned yelling, I might have believed what he later claimed about speaking in the heat of the moment. But he sat across from me, looked directly at me, and said, "If you won't let him move in, then I want a divorce." No build-up. No shaking voice, no, I don't know what else to do. Just a clean little sentence dropped in the middle of our life. I didn't answer. He waited, maybe expecting me to panic and agree immediately. When I kept staring at him, he said, "I'm serious." I picked up my keys and left. I drove for about an hour without going anywhere in particular. I passed the same grocery store twice. I cried at a red light, got angry at myself for crying, then cried harder because apparently that was useful. I kept hearing his voice in my head. "If you won't let him move in, then I want a divorce." 10 years together reduced to whether his friend could take over my office. Part of me wanted to go home and call his bluff. Another part wanted to agree just to make the threat disappear. That's humiliating to admit, but it's true. When someone you love suddenly holds the whole relationship over your head, your first instinct isn't always dignity. Sometimes it's bargaining. Sometimes it's, "Fine, take the room, take the closet, take whatever you want, just stop making me feel disposable." I didn't do that, but not because I was strong. I was too shocked to make any decision at all. When I came home, he was in bed facing the wall. I changed clothes in the bathroom and slept on the couch. The next morning, he acted like we had simply had a disagreement. He made coffee. He asked whether I needed anything from the store. He kissed the side of my head before leaving for work, and I sat there holding my mug like an idiot. For the next 2 days, neither of us mentioned the ultimatum. I watched him more closely instead. He left every morning at the same time, dressed for work, carrying his laptop bag. He came home around the usual hour and complained about traffic or a meeting or someone from his department. Nothing looked different, but that made the threat feel even stranger. My husband had never been decisive about anything. He spent 3 weeks comparing vacuum cleaners before buying one. He couldn't choose a restaurant without reading half the menu online. Yet somehow, in less than an hour, he had decided he was willing to end our marriage over a 6-week housing problem. That didn't feel impulsive. It felt prepared. And once that thought got into my head, I couldn't get it out. The bank account was what finally gave me something concrete to be suspicious about. We had a joint checking account for rent, utilities, groceries, and the boring expenses nobody puts in anniversary posts. Our paychecks went into it, and we each kept a small separate account for personal spending. I usually checked the balance, made sure the automatic payments had cleared, and moved on. I wasn't auditing every deposit because I trusted my husband. 3 days after the ultimatum, I opened the account to estimate what adding another adult would actually do to our monthly expenses. I expected to see his paycheck near the top of the transaction list. It wasn't there. I scrolled back. Nothing the week before either. Then I went back another week. His last deposit had been almost a month earlier. My stomach did this awful little drop. I checked the dates twice, then opened a spreadsheet because apparently my response to marital panic is administrative work. There was enough money in the account because my salary had come in, and we had a cushion. The rent had been paid. The power bill had cleared. Nothing had bounced, which explained why I hadn't noticed. When he came home, I tried to sound casual. Did payroll change something? He paused while taking off his shoes. Just a second, but I saw it. What do you mean? Your paycheck hasn't hit the joint account in 3 weeks. He turned away from me and started going through the mail. There's some issue with payroll. They're fixing it. What kind of issue? I don't know. An administrative thing. For 3 weeks? He sighed like I was being exhausting. I said they're fixing it. Then he asked what we were having for dinner. That was it. No irritation about missing money. No complaint about his employer. No attempt to show me an email or explain when it would be corrected. My husband once called a delivery place 4 times over a missing side of fries. He was not a patient person when he felt someone owed him anything. But 3 missing paychecks? Suddenly he was peaceful. I didn't push him that night. Again, not because I had some clever strategy. I was scared of what I might find. It was easier to let him make pasta and talk about a fake problem at work than to ask the question already screaming in my head. Had he lost his job? The next morning, he left at the same time as always. I watched from the window as he crossed the parking lot and got into his car. He even had the laptop bag. I felt ridiculous spying on my own husband. But the whole performance looked too complete now. The clothes, the bag, the coffee in the travel cup, the quick kiss goodbye. It was like he had memorized the shape of a normal workday and kept acting it out. I spent that day trying to work and failing. Every time a message popped up on my screen, I thought it might be him confessing. Every time I heard a car outside, I looked through the blinds. By lunch, the moving plan made horrible sense. His friend wasn't just someone who needed help. His friend had income. If he moved in and paid part of the rent, my husband could hide a missing salary longer. He could present the money as a favor between friends while I absorbed the loss of my office and probably more than half the household expenses. I hated how fast my brain connected the pieces. Because once it did, I started reviewing every recent conversation like evidence. The sudden concern about his friend's lease, the refusal to give me a timeline, the vague answers about money, the divorce threat. He hadn't been trying to help his friend. He had been trying to solve something. I still didn't know what. Early the following week, the property manager called me while I was reviewing a quarterly report. I almost ignored it because I didn't recognize the number, but I answered on the last ring. She introduced herself and said they had received a request to add another adult occupant to our lease. They had my husband's initial information, but they still needed my authorization and some documents. For a second, I couldn't speak. Sorry, I said. Who is being added? She gave me the friend's first name. I stood up so quickly, my chair rolled backward into the wall. I did not authorize that. There was a pause on her end. Her voice became careful. She said no change could be completed without both leaseholders signing, and that was why she was calling. Please note that I do not consent, I said. Not verbally, not in writing, not in any way. Do not add anyone. She assured me they wouldn't. I asked when the request had been submitted. 2 days before my husband asked me. That detail landed harder than the request itself. By the time he sat me down at the kitchen table and presented the move as an idea, he had already started the paperwork. My time to think about it had been fake. The discussion had been fake. He wasn't asking. He was waiting for me to cooperate with something he had already promised. I ended the call and spent 10 full minutes pacing between my desk and the hallway. I wanted to call him immediately, but I knew I'd say something I couldn't take back. So I typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too, then finally sent. The property manager just called me. Come home after work. We need to talk. He replied almost instantly. About what? That made me so angry I laughed out loud. You know what? He didn't respond. He came home about an hour later than usual. I was sitting at the table with my laptop open, the bank account on the screen and a notepad beside it. Yes, it looked like an interrogation. No, I don't regret that part. He saw everything and stopped in the doorway. The property manager called, I said. He put his keys down very slowly. I was just getting information. You submitted a request to add him to our lease. It wasn't final. You did it before you even talked to me. I knew there would be paperwork. I was trying to get ahead of it. Get ahead of my answer? He rubbed both hands over his face. Why are you turning this into something bigger than it is? That sentence almost broke something in me. You threatened divorce when I didn't immediately agree. You started changing our lease without me. Your paychecks disappeared and you gave me an explanation that makes no sense. Tell me what this actually is. His eyes moved toward the laptop screen. Then he got angry. Not guilty, not scared, angry. Why are you going through the account like that? It's our account. You're looking for reasons not to trust me. I found reasons. He said I was making connections that weren't there. He said the payroll issue had nothing to do with his friend. He said the request to the property manager was just preliminary. He said his ultimatum had been stupid, but I was also being unfair by treating his best friend like a burden. I kept asking the same question. Why hasn't your salary come in? And he kept answering everything except that. Eventually, he said he was tired and went to shower. I let him. I sat at the table staring at the closed bathroom door and felt the strangest mix of fury and shame. Part of me still worried I had become the kind of wife who monitored money and questioned every movement. Another part of me wanted to grab his laptop bag and dump it out just to see whether there was even a work computer inside. The next morning, he left again. By then, I had stopped believing he was going to work. The friend appeared at our door 4 days later with 3 boxes, a duffel bag, and the stupid travel mug wedged under one arm. It was early Saturday afternoon. My husband had gone out less than an hour before, saying he needed to run errands. I was in the office catching up on work I'd neglected all week when someone knocked. I opened the door and just stared. The friend smiled like this was awkward but settled. Hey. He said I could start bringing some smaller stuff over. I looked at the boxes. One was labeled books. Another had kitchen items sticking out of the top. This wasn't a casual visit. No, I said. His smile disappeared. No? You're not moving in. He shifted the box in his arms. He said you agreed. I did not. He said the paperwork was basically done. The paperwork he submitted without telling me? I canceled it. Now he looked genuinely confused. He put the box down in the hallway. Wait, he told me you were okay with this. I asked for time to think. Then he threatened to divorce me if I said no. The friend's whole face changed. He what? I almost didn't believe the surprise. For one ugly second, I thought both of them had planned this and he was acting. I crossed my arms and said, You knew his paycheck stopped coming into our account though, right? He went completely still. That was the answer. You knew, I said. He looked toward the parking lot, then back at me. I knew he lost his job. I thought you knew too. The hallway seemed to tilt. I put one hand on the doorframe. He lost his job? About a month ago. Maybe a little more. He said you two were handling it. I laughed once, but there was nothing funny in it. He told me payroll had an administrative delay. The friend swore under his breath. He looked sick now, not defensive. He said my husband had told him we had already agreed that he could use the office for a while. In exchange, he would pay a fixed amount each month toward rent and utilities. He thought he was helping both of us while saving money before finding another place. How much? I asked. He told me. It was enough to cover most of what my husband normally contributed to rent and utilities. Of course it was. The friend kept saying he was sorry, that he never would have shown up with boxes if he knew I had said no. I believed him more than I wanted to. He looked embarrassed and he wasn't trying to enter anymore. He was actually stepping backward. Then my husband came around the corner carrying 2 grocery bags. He stopped when he saw us. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. The friend said, You told me she agreed. My husband looked at me, not him. We were still discussing it. No, I said. You told him I agreed. I said we were working out the details. You told me the paperwork was basically done, the friend said. My husband put the bags on the floor and lowered his voice. Can we not do this in the hallway? I almost screamed. You brought a man here with moving boxes, but now you're worried about privacy? A neighbor's door opened down the hall, then quietly closed again. I didn't care. My husband tried to take one of the boxes, but his friend pulled it away. Did you tell her you got fired? My husband's face went pale. There it was. No more payroll delay. No more administrative problem. No more careful acting. He told his friend to come inside so they could explain. I said the friend wasn't coming inside with anything. The friend said he didn't want to come inside at all. Then they started arguing with each other, and that was when I understood the ugliest part. My husband had lied in both directions. He told me his friend needed help. He told his friend we needed help and had agreed to the arrangement. He used each of us to make the other one easier to pressure. He wanted his friend arriving with boxes before I could stop it, because once the boxes crossed the door, refusing would look cruel. His friend picked up the box he had set down. I'm leaving, he said. My husband stepped in front of him. Don't make this worse. The friend stared at him. I'm not the one who made this. He carried the boxes back toward the stairs. My husband watched him go, then turned to me with this exhausted, resentful look, as if the two of us had ruined a perfectly reasonable plan. I moved aside and let him enter. Tell me everything, I said. Right now. He closed the door behind him, and for the first time since our marriage started falling apart, He had nowhere left to hide. He sat at the table where, less than 2 weeks earlier, he had threatened to end our marriage if I didn't give up my office. The grocery bags stayed by the door. One of them tipped over, and a jar rolled across the floor. Neither of us picked it up. He told me he had been fired a little over a month earlier. The way he explained it, the job loss had not come out of nowhere. He had been late repeatedly. His performance had dropped. He had missed deadlines and already received warnings. He said his manager had been looking for a reason, which was his usual way of describing consequences he didn't like. But even he couldn't make it sound like a surprise. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He kept looking at the table. I was embarrassed. "So you pretended to go to work every day?" "I was applying for jobs." "Where?" "Coffee shops, sometimes his apartment." "With the laptop bag?" He snapped that the bag had his personal laptop in it. Like that detail somehow restored his dignity. He said he thought he could find something quickly and replace the missing income before I noticed. When 2 weeks passed without an offer, he panicked. His friend had already mentioned the rent increase, so my husband saw a solution. His friend could move in, contribute to the household, and give him more time to find work. "Your solution was my office," I said. "It was the only extra room. It wasn't extra. We could have adjusted." "You mean I could have adjusted?" He said I was focusing on the wrong thing. He had lost his job, he was scared. And instead of supporting him, I was attacking him over where a desk would go. That was the moment I stopped crying. Until then, I had been fighting tears so hard my jaw hurt. But hearing him turn my office into the petty detail and his lies into a symptom of fear made me go completely cold. "You threatened me with divorce," I said. I was desperate. "You filed paperwork behind my back. I was trying to fix the problem. You told your friend I agreed. I thought once you understood the situation, you would. But you never told me the situation." He pushed back from the table and started pacing. He said he knew how I reacted to financial stress. He reminded me that I had grown up in a house where money was always tight and arguments about bills were constant. He said he didn't want me to spiral. That part hurt because it was not entirely invented. I do spiral about money. I check due dates too often. I keep emergency savings because my childhood version of an emergency was the power being shut off. He knew that about me. But instead of trusting me with the truth, he used my fear as permission to deceive me. "You didn't protect me from stress," I said. "You let me keep paying bills while you built a fake plan around me." He told me he would repay everything when he found work. I asked whether he understood that this wasn't just about the money. He said, "What else could it possibly be about?" I almost threw the water glass at the wall. I didn't, but I wanted to. Instead, I said, "Sleep on the couch." He laughed in disbelief. "This is my home too. And you were ready to end our marriage over it." He stared at me for a long time. Then he took a blanket from the closet and slept in the living room. I barely slept at all. Around 3 in the morning, I opened our message history and searched words like work, meeting, boss, and traffic. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to count the lies. There were dozens. Little ordinary lies were somehow worse than one big confession. He had messaged me about a difficult meeting on a day he had apparently spent at a coffee shop. He had complained about a coworker. He had said he might be late because of a deadline. I sat in bed reading them until my eyes burned. Then I sent him a message even though he was 1 room away. "How many times were you going to lie before you told me?" He didn't answer. The next morning, I found him sitting on the couch with his phone in his hand. He looked terrible, and for 1 weak second, I wanted to sit beside him. 10 years doesn't disappear just because someone betrays you. Your body still recognizes them as home even when your brain is screaming that the house is on fire. He apologized. At first, it sounded real. He said he had made everything worse. He said he should have told me immediately. He said the divorce threat was cruel. I started crying, and he reached for my hand. Then he added, "But I need you to understand why I did it." There it was. The apology came with homework for me. Over the next few days, he shifted between remorse and irritation. He promised to apply for more jobs. He showed me a list of applications. He offered to take temporary work. Then, sometimes in the same conversation, he said I was punishing him too harshly and acting as if he had cheated. I told him betrayal did not become harmless just because nobody took their clothes off. He didn't like that. He also kept trying to rescue the original plan. He said maybe his friend could sleep in the living room instead of using the office. He could put up a divider. It would only be for a few weeks. The friend had not agreed to any of that. But my husband talked as if moving him around the apartment solved the problem. "You're still trying to make him move in," I said. "I'm trying to keep us afloat. We can pay the rent for now, with your income, and our savings." "So you're comfortable burning through savings because you're angry?" I said something ugly then. I told him our savings were disappearing because he had been fired for acting like a teenager, and then spent weeks playing dress-up every morning instead of telling his wife. The second it came out, I regretted it. His face changed. He said very quietly, "That's what you really think of me." I wanted to take it back, but I was also furious that he had finally found a sentence where he could be the wounded one. "I think you made childish choices," I said. "That isn't the same thing." He packed a small bag and left for his friend's apartment. I didn't stop him. His friend let him stay, which surprised me after the hallway disaster. Later, I understood it as loyalty with limits. They had known each other for years, and the friend wasn't ready to throw him onto the street. But he also didn't agree to move into our place, and he stopped answering my husband's attempts to revive the arrangement. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet after he left. I thought I would feel relieved. Instead, I wandered from room to room, checking things that didn't need checking. I opened the refrigerator, closed it, opened it again. I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at his side. Then I got angry at myself for missing him and went back to work. That week, I made a mistake in a report. It wasn't catastrophic. I entered a figure in the wrong row, and another analyst caught it before anything went out. But my supervisor asked me to stay on a call afterward and said my concentration seemed off. "Is something going on?" she asked. I lied and said I wasn't sleeping well. That wasn't exactly false, but it wasn't the truth either. She told me to take the afternoon if I needed it. I thanked her, ended the call, and burst into tears at my desk. My husband's plan had centered on the idea that my office was just a room I could surrender. Meanwhile, the stress he created was already following me into the work that paid our rent. I called my closest friend and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which almost made it worse. When I finished, she said, "He didn't make one scared decision. He built a system." That sentence stayed with me. And when I listed everything he had done, she was right. The fake commute. The fake work stories. The hidden job loss. The agreement with his friend. The lease request. The ultimatum. None of it was one panicked mistake. Each lie supported the next one. 2 days later, I contacted a divorce lawyer. The lawyer was calm and practical. I told her we rented, had no children, owned no property, and didn't have major shared assets beyond furniture, savings, and 2 older cars. I explained the job loss, the hidden plan, the attempt to change the lease, and the ultimatum. She didn't tell me what emotional meaning to assign any of it. I appreciated that. She told me what to preserve. Messages, account records, communication from the property manager, anything showing the proposed lease change. She advised me not to change the locks because my husband was still a legal tenant. She said I could open an individual account and redirect future paychecks, but I should keep enough in the joint account for shared obligations until we had a formal arrangement. I left the consultation feeling both steadier and sick. That afternoon, I opened a new account. The next morning, I changed my direct deposit. I kept enough money in the joint account for rent, utilities, and other bills we had already committed to. I made a list of everything. I saved copies of statements. I felt like I was dismantling my marriage through office tasks, one password and automatic payment at a time. My husband texted regularly from his friend's apartment. At first, the messages were apologetic. He said he missed me. He said he was applying everywhere. He said he understood why I needed space. Then he noticed my salary had not entered the joint account. "Did you move your paycheck?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I need to separate my finances. That's a huge decision to make without talking to me." I stared at that message so long I started laughing. I replied, "You submitted a lease request without talking to me." He said those things were not comparable. I did not answer. When we spoke about bills, I asked whether he had gotten any interviews. He would say he was waiting to hear back, or that a recruiter had viewed his application. Once he accused me of asking in a judgmental tone. I told him there was no safe tone for asking why my unemployed husband was still lying to me. That night, he sent a voice message that lasted several minutes. He said I had abandoned him at the worst moment of his life. He said marriages were supposed to survive job loss. He said I had decided he was worthless because he could no longer contribute the same amount of money. He barely mentioned the threat, the lease, or the lies. I listened twice, hoping I had missed the part where he took responsibility. I hadn't. I forwarded the message to my friend, then immediately felt guilty because it was private. She called and asked if I wanted honesty or comfort. Honesty. "He still thinks the job loss is the crime and your reaction is the punishment," she said. "He doesn't understand that the lying is the thing." I knew she was right. I told the lawyer to file. The petition was submitted during the 3rd week after the Sunday dinner. My husband did not know yet. I walked around for days with the knowledge sitting inside me, feeling like I had crossed a line even though nothing in the apartment looked different. His shoes were still by the bedroom closet. His coffee was still in the cabinet. Our wedding photo was still on the bookshelf. I almost called him twice to stop the filing. The first time, I found one of his old shirts in the laundry and cried into it like a woman in a bad movie. The second time, he sent me a photo of a job application confirmation with the message, "See? I'm trying." For a few minutes, I imagined letting him come home. We could try counseling. We could separate the finances but stay married. He could sleep on the couch until I trusted him again. Maybe the ultimatum was one awful sentence, not the truth about how he saw me. Then I remembered the property manager telling me the request had been submitted before he even asked. The conversation had never been real. That was the part I couldn't get around. He was served at his friend's apartment in the 4th week. He called me immediately. I answered because I had been told there might be practical questions. But the second I heard his voice, I knew there would be nothing practical about it. "You filed for divorce?" "Yes." "Without telling me?" The hypocrisy was so complete that I had no response at first. He kept going. He said I had humiliated him in front of his friend. He said I had turned a temporary financial problem into a legal attack. Then he asked the question he would repeat to other people for months. "You're really ending 10 years over a room?" I pressed my fingers against my forehead. "It was never about the room. That's all you keep talking about." "No. I keep talking about the fact that you promised my workspace to someone else, tried to add him to our lease without consent, hid your firing, lied every day, and threatened divorce to force me to agree." He said the ultimatum had been said in the heat of the moment. I reminded him that he had left the room for almost an hour before coming back to say it. He went quiet. "You thought about it," I said. "You came back calm." Another long pause. Then he said, "I thought if I made it serious, you'd stop saying no." I closed my eyes. He must have realized how it sounded because he immediately started explaining. He said he knew I was afraid of divorce because my parents' separation had been ugly. He said he thought I would understand how desperate he was. He said he never actually wanted to leave me. "You wanted me to be afraid enough to obey you," I said. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you just said." He started crying. That was the hardest part of the whole call. Not the anger, not the accusation. Hearing him cry made every good year of our relationship rush back at once. The road trips, the cheap first apartment, the night he stayed awake with me when my mother was in the hospital, the way he always warmed my side of the bed in winter. People want betrayal to erase love because it makes leaving cleaner, but it doesn't. I still loved him while listening to him admit he had used my worst fear to control me. He asked me to withdraw the filing. I said no. He asked whether there was someone else. I almost laughed, then realized he was serious. "There is no one else. So you can just throw us away? You already put us on the table as a threat." He said that was unfair. I told him future communication needed to go through the lawyers unless it concerned bills or the apartment. Before hanging up, he said, "You're going to regret doing this while you're angry." I said, "I'm doing it because I'm finally not confused." My hand shook for 20 minutes after the call, but I didn't call back. A few days later, the lawyers arranged a time for my husband to collect most of his belongings. He came on a weekday afternoon while I was working. I had considered asking my friend to be there, but I didn't want an audience unless I needed one. He had never been physically threatening, and our communication had become cold rather than explosive. Still, I texted my friend when he arrived and told her I would contact her again when he left. He used his key. The sound of it in the lock made my entire body tense. I stayed in the office while he moved through the bedroom and hallway. Every drawer sounded louder than it should have. Hangers scraped against the closet rod. Tape ripped across cardboard. At one point, he dropped something and swore. And I nearly stood up before reminding myself he was capable of picking up his own belongings. About an hour later, he appeared in my doorway. He looked around the office as if he had never really seen it before. My work monitors were on. Reports covered one screen and a meeting schedule filled the other. Behind me were filing boxes, reference books, and the small printer I used constantly. "This is what ended us," he said. I turned my chair toward him. "No." He leaned against the doorframe. "You got to keep the apartment. You got to keep your office. I lost my job, my home, and my wife. You didn't lose them all in one accident." He flinched. That sounded harsher than I intended, but I was tired of being assigned the role of person who had done this to him. He said he never imagined hiding the job loss could cost him his marriage. I told him it wasn't one lie. It was everything he did to maintain it. He nodded like he heard me, but I couldn't tell whether he understood. Before leaving, he placed his key on the kitchen counter. Technically, he was still on the lease, so the key return was voluntary, not a formal surrender. The lawyer had already told me that. I didn't say anything about it. He carried the last box into the hallway, then came back for a smaller one. When he finally left, he didn't look at me. I locked the door and texted my friend. He's gone. Then I walked into the bedroom. His side of the closet was mostly empty. 2 bare hangers swung slightly because he had pulled clothes away too fast. He had left a box of wedding photos on the floor. I sat beside it and opened the lid, which was a terrible decision. The first picture was us laughing outside the courthouse after signing our marriage license. My hair was blowing across my face and he was trying to move it away. I closed the box. I didn't throw it out. I wasn't ready. I pushed it to the back of the closet and cried on the floor for a while, then washed my face and returned to work, because life is rude like that. Your marriage can end at 2 in the afternoon, and someone still needs the corrected forecast before 5. During the 5th week, I started hearing the version of the story my husband was telling other people. A woman we both knew sent me a cautious message. She said she didn't want to get involved, but my husband had told a group of friends that I had filed for divorce because I refused to let his best friend stay in our spare room for a short time. Spare room. I typed a response explaining everything, deleted it, typed another, then stopped. I didn't want to spend the next year conducting a public trial through mutual friends. I told her there was more to the situation, but I wasn't discussing legal details. She replied with a heart, which was kind but not especially useful. That evening, I got a message from his friend. He asked one direct question. Had I ever, at any point, told my husband that he could move in? I stared at it for a long time. Part of me resented being asked. He had watched the confrontation at my door. He had heard me say I never agreed. Why did he need another confirmation? Then I realized my husband was probably still telling him the same story. I answered, no. I asked for time to think. I never said yes, and I canceled the lease request as soon as the property manager called. He replied almost immediately. He said my husband continued to insist that I had agreed verbally and changed my mind later because I was angry about the job loss. The friend wanted the answer in writing because he no longer knew what to believe. That made me sad in a way I hadn't expected. Their friendship had lasted longer than my marriage. My husband had used that trust too. I sent one more message. When you came with the boxes, that was the first time I knew he had told you I agreed. The friend said he was sorry. I didn't tell him it was fine because it wasn't. He should have confirmed with both people before trying to move into a married couple's home. He had been careless, even if he had also been lied to. I told him I believed he hadn't known, but I needed distance from the whole situation. He respected that for several days. Then, near the end of the 6th week, he wrote again. This message was longer. He said he had confronted my husband with my written answer. My husband first claimed there had been a misunderstanding, then accused both of us of turning against him while he was unemployed. They argued. The friend told him he had to find somewhere else to stay because the lease was ending and he wasn't renewing. He said he finally understood that my husband had used the move to cover the missing income and create a situation I would feel too guilty to refuse. He admitted he should never have appeared at my door with boxes based only on one person's word. I read the message twice. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't want to become the person he reported to whenever my husband made another bad choice. Their friendship was theirs to repair or end. I had spent enough time inside that triangle. My husband's 6-week housing deadline, the one he had tried to solve with my office, arrived exactly as scheduled. His friend moved out of the old apartment. My husband had to leave too. For a while, I didn't know where he went. The divorce paperwork moved forward slowly but without major conflict. We had no children, no house, and no business to divide. The bigger issue was the apartment. Both our names were still on the lease, and I wanted to stay. Moving would mean deposits, application fees, time away from work, and giving up the one space that still felt stable. But the property manager needed to confirm that my income alone met the requirements. For several days, I was terrified it wouldn't. I had savings, steady employment, and good payment history, but the rent had been approved based on 2 incomes. I gathered pay records, bank statements, and employment verification. I checked my email obsessively. Every hour without an answer felt like proof that I had been foolish to assume I could keep the place. That fear brought back the worst part of my husband's argument. What if I really had destroyed my own stability? What if refusing his plan meant losing the apartment anyway? What if I ended up paying more somewhere smaller while he told everyone I had chosen an office over a marriage? My friend came over one Sunday with takeout and found me sitting at the table with a calculator. You have done the math 6 times, she said. 7. That is not better. The property manager approved me. I read the email standing in the kitchen and started crying so hard I had to sit down. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was relief with exhaustion mixed into it. I forwarded the approval to my lawyer and then stared around the apartment. The office was still mine. The bedroom was mostly mine. The rent was definitely mine, which was less romantic. My husband agreed to sign the release, removing his name from the lease once the property manager confirmed the transfer. His new address on the divorce documents was his parents' house. I learned that from paperwork, not from him. His parents lived several hours away. They had always been kind to me, and losing them was another part of the divorce I had not prepared for. His mother called once after he moved in with them. She said she wasn't calling to pressure me, then spent 20 minutes explaining how ashamed and depressed he was. I listened because I cared about her. When she said, "People make mistakes when they're scared," I replied, "Yes, they do." She waited for me to add something softer. I didn't. She asked whether I would consider counseling before finalizing anything. I told her the filing was already moving forward and I wasn't changing my decision. Her voice became cool after that. She said she hoped I never needed the kind of grace I was refusing to give. That sentence hurt for days. I wanted to call her back and explain every detail. I wanted her to understand that I had loved her son, that I had considered staying, that I wasn't leaving because he was unemployed. I wrote a long message and never sent it. Trying to win his family's approval would have kept me tied to the same argument forever. The final agreement was painfully ordinary. We divided the savings. Each kept a car. I kept most of the apartment furniture and paid him a modest amount to balance the difference. There was no dramatic court scene. No judge delivered a speech. No one gasped when evidence was revealed. We signed documents in separate offices. Before I signed, I sat with the pen in my hand and cried quietly. My lawyer gave me tissues and looked away, which I appreciated. I didn't doubt the decision. I grieved it. Those are not the same thing. The divorce became final months after the night of the ultimatum. By then, the apartment looked different. I had moved the table closer to the window. I donated some decorations we had chosen together because seeing them made me angry for no sensible reason. I replaced the stained couch cover instead of the couch because my budget did not support emotional furniture purchases. I also started having Sunday dinners again. The first one was just me and my closest friend. I made too much food because I was used to unexpected guests. Halfway through dinner, she looked at the empty chair and said, "Should we put a travel mug there for memory?" I laughed so hard I nearly choked. That was the first time the whole situation felt like something that had happened to me instead of something still happening. I heard occasional updates through mutual acquaintances. My ex-husband was still living with his parents. He had found some temporary work, lost it, and was applying again. I never asked whether he and his former best friend had repaired things. From what little I heard, they were no longer close, but I didn't know whether that was permanent. I did not celebrate any of it. There were nights when I missed him so much I had to remind myself why the bed was empty. There were moments when I wondered whether I had been too final, too angry, too unwilling to let a terrified person repair what he had broken. Then I would remember the calm way he said divorce, not as a fear, not as a possibility, as a tool. Months after everything was finalized, he sent one last message. He said he was still with his parents, still looking for something stable, and trying to understand how his life had changed so fast. He said he knew he had handled the job loss badly, but still couldn't believe I had cut him out completely. Then he asked whether I really intended never to speak to him again. I read it at my desk in the office he had promised away. For a few minutes, I typed and deleted different responses. I could have told him I didn't hate him. I could have said I hoped he found work. I could have explained one more time that the marriage ended because he chose control over honesty. I could have asked whether he finally understood. But every possible answer felt like reopening a conversation where I had already said everything. So I put my phone face down and went back to work. That Sunday, I cooked dinner, opened the window because the apartment was warm, and sat at the table by myself. It was quiet, but not the tense kind of quiet that had filled the place after the ultimatum, just normal quiet. The dishwasher hummed. A car alarm went off somewhere outside. My office door stood open down the hall. I thought about what would have happened if I'd panicked and said yes that night. His friend would have moved into my workspace. I would have worked from the kitchen or bedroom while paying most of the bills. My husband would have kept pretending the problem was temporary. Maybe he would have found a job quickly. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, I would have learned that threatening to leave me was an effective way to get what he wanted. That was the future I had refused. I finished dinner, put the plate in the dishwasher, and left his message unanswered.